Hey folks, it's Nate, and thanks for joining me at the art table again today. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Heckler as an Enervator. And this is kind of the opposite of what I talked about last week when I talked about the audience as a source of energy. There is a real danger when you are interacting a lot with your audience that you will find hecklers who just sap you and drain you. And there's a real struggle there because, as I said before, these people are potentially your audience. The catch is, hecklers are not your audience yet. And there is an interesting line to walk as you try and figure out how you're going to deal with them. And this is a place where the analysis, the comparison between a live audience and your audience as a creative person on the internet really breaks down. Part of this is because when you have somebody disruptive in the middle of an audience, in, say, a theater, you just throw them out. You have paying customers who are there to hear you give your performance or see you give your performance, and this heckler is just making everything bad for them. So you just throw them out. You have to, because otherwise you cannot fulfill your duty to your actual audience to show them what you want to show them, to share with them what you want to share with them. This doesn't exist on the internet. You can, of course, throw people out. You can block them. You can ban them, there's a number of tools depending on your venue where you can effectively kick people out. I'm not saying you should never use them, but you should definitely think hard before you do. The fact is, you do have an opportunity to win your hecklers over. But at the same time, not all hecklers can be won over. There is a real difficulty in discerning whether you can turn a person who doesn't like your content into a person who does. In general, it's better to go after the people who are apathetic to your content rather than those who actively seem to dislike it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to put up with paying attention to the people who actively dislike your content. A lot of forums like Twitter or Facebook give you the option of just ignoring people, and this is probably your safest bet. Listen, when we are performing live in a theater, we don't go out and ask random passerbys on the street who aren't interested in what we're doing what they think of the show we're putting on. They haven't seen us do it, they're not interested in that kind of a show, or they would have bought a ticket and come in and watched it. So if they say, hey, they're doing Sherlock Holmes, that sounds dumb, nobody cares. They're just not important. Their opinions shouldn't enervate you, and you shouldn't really go looking for them. So feel free to use these tools that let you just ignore people who seem to be down on what you're doing without any interest in engaging with it. If they're not offering you creative feedback, if they don't seem to be engaged with the kind of product you're actually offering, if they just seem to find the concept silly or stupid, you should ignore them, just like we don't go out and talk to passerbys on the street. However, actively kicking people out tends to make you look like you can't take criticism, like you're thin-skinned. And the reality is, on the internet, people can't really heckle you to the point where your audience can't see or hear you unless they get you banned from a platform. Now, that is a danger, but there's nothing you can really do about it. And if you're just ignoring the hecklers, they're not getting what they want anyways, which is your aggravation. So you're better off just using those tools to ignore them. Now, the second problem with this is your audience, the people who actually like what you're doing, tend to find these people obnoxious. And they tend to engage them with a lot, and often they'll try and bring them to your attention. Don't go into that. It doesn't look very professional. It kind of makes you look like a bully. Whether that's fair or not, it creates that impression. And if you're trying to promote yourself, it's better off not to create that impression than it is to have the possibility that it will exist. And besides, you're not really getting anything out of it. You're just putting energy into responding to these people who don't care about you anyways. They just want, I don't know what they want. They could want drama. They could just want to know that they're getting under your skin. Who cares? Who cares? They're not important. Your audience is important. The heckler is not. Don't give the heckler importance. Now, there are a lot of people out there who say, hey, I can monetize my haters. Why don't I go out and feud with these people and then I'll get a bunch of free content. And if you're looking to make just content, if you just want things people can consume, if you just want people clicking and paying attention to you, sure, by all means, monetize your haters. But if you're looking to create something of artistic merit that stands on its own, something that people can appreciate without any knowledge of who your haters are, you have to ignore your hecklers. They can't be a part of your life every day because they're going to eat up so much of it. You're not actually going to be creating anything worthwhile. I know there are a lot of people who monetize the haters as a way to keep themselves in the churn and keep their stuff in front of you and make sure you're paying attention to them. And it's a very tempting route to go down. But ultimately, you are promoting your haters as well as yourself. Don't promote the people who heckle you. That's not good press. You look like the product is the fight between you and your heckler and not the art that you are being heckled over. Bring people in with your art and the hecklers won't matter. Don't let the hecklers enervate your product, your art, by tying themselves into it. That is the way to make sure the hecklers take over everything you're doing. It is a waste of time. So, again, hecklers are just street people who don't know anything about what you're doing, aren't invested in it in any way, and talk down on you anyways. These people aren't worth the time it takes to respond to them. These aren't like real critics who are raising valid objections to what you're trying to say. So just ignore them. If they get into a place where they can disrupt your audience, I would recommend looking at ways to deal with that, especially if they are impacting your audience's enjoyment. As a creator, you have an obligation to your audience to make sure they are able to engage with what you are creating in a way that is free of disruption. And maybe if you are one of these streamers who likes a bloodthirsty chat or likes an argumentative chat or just likes a very active chat, you're okay with having these hecklers in there and your audience is okay with engaging with them. In which case, that experience is part of what you are creating for them. By all means, go for it. But if you are more interested in having a forum or a comment section that is discussing the story and what is good and what is bad about it, and somebody comes in and says, you're doing sci-fi. Sci-fi went out in the 80s. Yeah, just kick them out. You are then creating an atmosphere that is for your audience and not for hecklers. And again, this is something that takes discernment. It's something that's not going to be for every creator. It's certainly not going to be in the same place for every creator, but it is something you have to learn to manage in order to maintain an audience. I sincerely believe that it will be better for you and for your audience if you set these boundaries early on and you enforce them without favoritism. I know that every creator likes their audience to be stroking their ego, but the reality is you need to have critics in your audience who will say things you can learn from, at the same time as you need to not have hecklers who are making it difficult for your actual audience to engage with what you're doing. Anyway, that's the other side, I think, of the audience's energy, because these hecklers, they just drag down what's going on in your community. And you have to be very discerning in dealing with these people. In an ideal world, you could just let these people run around and they wouldn't be a problem. And frankly, on social media especially, I think the options to ignore or just disengage with people are better than options that completely cut them out, than bans or blocks or things like that. Just set mutes, just set ignores, and by and large, that's going to do what you want to do. But there are extreme cases where you are going to have to occasionally burn the hecklers out of your community to make sure your audience is able to enjoy the product you are creating with